Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our morning coffee time stream for Friday, July the 17th. I got an email this morning reminding me today that Lumpur Viradamo from Tisarana Monastery is going to give an online talk today. That'll be at 4 p.m. West Coast time here in America, 7 p.m. East Coast time. And for the rest of the world, I guess you'll have to do the math. But this is another one of his Friday Zoom talks. But also there was some extra news that a retreat at the end of August has been organized. So he'll be doing a 3-day virtual retreat or online retreat. I didn't have time to digest all the details, but if you're interested, I'm sure there'll be information from Tisarana, either their website or you can write them for information. So that's kind of nice. A 3-day should be something that many people could fit into their schedule. So please consider checking that out. I'm not on any email list for the Ajahn Suchito talks, but those seem to be happening on a pretty regular basis. Carol's here. Maybe she can remind us if that's happening tomorrow. So let me go back and see. I saw some early questions here. Oh, okay. On the topic of Ajahn Suchito. Carol just shared something here. Ajahn Suchito's on retreat. So there's recorded talks going. Okay. Thanks, Carol. So a little earlier when we just started up the stream, Sumana asked a question here. She's been reading a book titled Why We Sleep, and I believe that's by Matthew Walker. I also read that and recommended it to many people. With injunctions about the necessity of 8 hours of sleep for various reasons. Yet the practice says, sleep little. Any comments? So, well, first off, I thought it was an excellent book, and the subject of sleep interests me on many levels. And for those who are familiar with our tradition and the teachings of Ajahn Chah, there's a saying that comes up from Ajahn Chah. It encouraged his disciples to eat little, speak little, sleep little. Has a very short kind of pithy reminder of important qualities supporting being energetic and cultivating the suitable kind of conditions for a samana, a seeker of peace. So, and I would say this kind of injunction, coupled with, the notion that the Buddha was one devoted to wakefulness and himself didn't seem to sleep all that much. There's a culture of experimentation and sleeping little and practicing with even staying up all night kind of meditation vigils. So, and the book itself, I think is really interesting exploration. Like he's referencing a lot of modern science on the subject of sleep and what it might be doing for us in many areas of our life. So, and I've been quite interested in. It's a mysterious thing that we spend so much of our life in this state of sleep. So, there's, to me, it's an interesting book on many dimensions, like the psychological, the health aspects of it, what it says about this experience of human consciousness is. He has a little bit about meditation in there and seems relatively well informed about meditation. I was hoping for more, because something any dedicated practitioner notices is there is some sort of relationship to their meditation practice and the quality, especially the quality of their meditation practice, and to a certain extent the amount of time that they spend meditating in one day oftentimes disrupts sleep cycles or shifts them in various ways. It's something I've experienced often, and especially on a retreat, in retreat kind of atmosphere where you're meditating maybe 6, 8, 10 hours a day or more. Oftentimes, quite naturally, one's need for sleep, especially deep sleep, diminishes. And I think I experienced this in the first 10-day retreat I even did. So as the retreat progressed on, I found myself sleeping less hours, and my sleep was lighter and lighter, and I wasn't quite sure if that was good or bad, but I had a lot of enthusiasm and zeal for the practice. So, the fact that I wasn't sleeping didn't really bother me so much. I just used the time to do more meditation. So, I've long been kind of interested in what is this relationship to sleep and meditation, and the question, like, does meditation replace some of, or maybe even much of, the benefits of sleep? And I think anecdotally, there's certainly seems to be a lot of evidence for that, and like my experience, there seems to be some quite direct kind of correlation between the amount of time one spends, especially in serene states of meditation, and the amount that one is sometimes even possible to sleep. So it's not like through an act of will. It just quite naturally, I find myself sleeping less and sleeping lighter if I'm spending a few hours a day even enjoying a quite serene and peaceful meditation experience. So, and there's many different sort of Dhamma teachers, Kruba Ajahns, as they say in Thai, monks who have commented on this, and their general encouragement is to sleep little, partially to keep the effort and the energy focused on getting release and refreshment in one's sleep, but also because if one sleeps too much, it definitely seems to sort of lead to sort of lethargy and dullness in the mind and in the practice. So I find, I find that it's a really interesting and kind of important dimension for a practitioner, and maybe even becomes especially important if one's going to be putting a formal cultivation of their meditation practice at the center of their life, whether it's for a period of retreat or you're in a phase in your life where you really want to be prioritizing cultivating the mind, or especially in the cultivation of the jhanas, like attending to these things: how much you eat, how much you speak, how much you sleep. These are very fertile avenues of experimentation and exploration. And I'm a little leery of prescriptive, hard and fast and prescriptive amounts. There's notions that people kind of come up with, but I would say I think it's safer and probably more productive for people just to kind of have heard this and be aware that, these are things that you should attend to. They can greatly support one in one's practice if you start to develop a sense of what's the right amount of these things, especially in a time where you're trying to sort of deepen your skill in jhana or deepen your skill in serenity meditation. So, and because there's an inclination to one end of the spectrum, eating much, speaking much, sleeping much, the general encouragement is to try to go light in those dimensions and see what the effects are, and run some experiments for yourself. I generally find, as many practitioners do, that eating a bit lightly, reducing the amount of speaking that one is engaged in, and sleeping lightly has a really beneficial effect. And I'm a little, while I enjoyed this book, Why We Sleep, and he makes a very strong case for sleeping 8 hours, there are other opinions. So, like, I was actually working with a sleep specialist last year for various reasons, and I asked him what he thought about this book, and he went, yeah, or something. He didn't give it a hearty endorsement, especially this idea that we all need to sleep 8 hours. And I've read some other things that sort of explore sort of how different and unique we are, and some of that is reflected in the book. So, I don't think 8 hours is a bad general prescription for the general population, but both the author of this book, Matthew Walker, as well as other people I've read, are recognizing that we all have very unique kind of needs and even different patterns of how it is that we sleep. So, and it's for those reasons, like, I don't like to get hung up on very descriptive or fixed kind of ideas. Like so many things, listen to your body. Like, what nurtures energy and well-being and skillful qualities of mind, happiness of heart? I think we're really a little over inclined to look to the experts, and a little maybe lazy to listen to ourselves and to experiment and to really find our own sort of truth. So anyways, there's some thoughts, not just about the book and about sleep, but about these other central parts of a human experience in relationship to the cultivation of the mind. And maybe lastly, I might say, these things also are sources of happiness and joy for us. And what's interesting about going through a period of time where we experiment on, say, our relationship, like how much and also how we might be feeding on these as sources of happiness and joy in our life, that also has an effect on the meditation. So, we derive a certain amount of, we hunger for pleasure, we hunger for happiness, and we need to feed. We're always on the prowl and on the hunt for pleasing experiences. And these are three common kind of feeding grounds, we might say. We're looking for it in food and our relationship to food, into speech and our social engagement with others, and in sleep. And if you trim back on those things, purposefully to support the cultivation of your meditative life, both serenity and contemplative sides of that, it leaves you a little bit hungry. And, my experience and the experience of many others is the mind in that slightly hungry state settles down a little more quickly and feeds a little bit more deeply on even more sublime and skillful states of pleasure and happiness. So, and that's part of the reason why spiritual practitioners sometimes undertake periods of fasting and solitude and silence and sleep deprivation. So, of course, taking it too far is probably not so good, especially on a long-term basis. But as temporal experiences or temporal experiments, worth investigating. Worth investigating. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Moving on. Eleanor, good morning. Let's see, do you believe that everything happens for a reason? Like someone getting in touch with you or doing something and then not following back on what he or she had planned to do with you. So, I believe everything does happen for a reason. Like, I think not in any sense that things are predestined, but there are causes and conditions for things unfolding in the way that they do in the world. Things happen for a reason. It is not without reason, not without cause that things sort of happen. So, there is a space for agency in our lives. And like this example you have, somebody makes an agreement with us or something and they don't follow through. We could get kind of upset and angry about that if we're too focused on this notion that people are completely in control of themselves. And it can be a little bit of a safety valve to reflect that we're not. So, I mean, we know what skillful behavior is, and if people make commitments, they should keep them, and there's some sort of cost not to keeping them. But as a Dhamma practitioner, it's not worth suffering over. And part of how you can keep yourself from suffering about such things is to go beyond merely assuming that people have complete agency and control over their minds and their bodies, and they can make commitments and keep them perfectly. And when they don't, that it's a personal matter. It has something to do with you. Yeah. There could be all kinds of causes. So the moment our anticipation and expectations violated, we usually start generating stories trying to figure out why. And those stories tend to be skewed in the direction of framing everything through this idea that people have more control over their lives than they really do. Or, that it's more personal than maybe it really is. So, for me, the most important thing is protecting oneself from suffering over such things. And this kind of framework of seeing things through the lens of conditionality, and that things happen for reasons, does help protect one from suffering. And it's true. Things happen for reasons. They don't happen for no reason at all. Good morning, Dhammapala. Wow, you got a nice, beautiful new icon. I'm going to guess that's the Rocky Mountains. But okay, Ajahn, any advice on maintaining dispassion in a passionate world amongst the passionate? Yeah, make a firm determination. Others will be passionate. We will be dispassionate here. Oh, some of it is, we were talking about sense restraint lately. So some of it is who you hang out with and what you feed on and what you attend to. And if you surround yourself with passionate voices, and people that are prone to hyperbole, that has an effect on one. So associating with the wise, would say you should be wary of giving too much time and attention to such voices and such people. And then, of course, sense restraint, choosing wisely, things that help move one to dispassion and support one in their cultivation of being dispassionate is important. It's just really the whole of the path, quite frankly, because there's a whole mental cultivation that goes on there. It's like the passions and the exaggeration kind of washes out when we move towards sati and samadhi. When we reconnect with the present moment and strengthen this experience of serenity, many of those exaggerations fade away. Problems dissolve, which shows you that they're not really problems at all. In some personal, subjective sort of sense, we fret over things, but that fret can dissipate. We cultivate the right conditions of mind. So, and then also the wisdom element. Like, literally these are the voice of people who do not know themselves and do not see with the eye of wisdom the world as it really is, especially the powerful goodness in being free from that type of passion that leads to the experience of dukkha. So your relationship kind of to those voices and those ideas and those people also kind of changes as wisdom sort of matures. So, certain political voices, I listen to them and I just feel like this person's lost. I mean, they really don't have the kind of view that I'm looking for in the world. And their sights are set on the things that don't really lead one to this amazing experience of peace and freedom that the Buddha and wise people have spoken of and developed in themselves and encourage people to place in a high place of esteem in the human experience. the word bala comes to mind, which literally means childish, but it often is translated as foolish, or like foolish in terms of someone's understanding of Dhamma and Dhammic truth. So back to the theme of sleep. I think deep meditative states substitute for sleep. The more I meditate, the less I sleep. Well, I pretty much commented on that already, but yeah, there is definitely some relationship there that most people experience. So, there's a very well-known forest master who made some comment one time about how even just a few minutes of clear samadhi substituted for, I can't remember if he said a couple hours of sleep or 4 hours of sleep or something. And this monk had quite the reputation as being a very adept meditator. So it'd be nice to connect some of these sleep researchers with great meditators. I've often thought of that. When you look at the subjects of their experiments and their research, although I suppose it's hard to control for the variables, and that makes forest monks maybe really bad research subjects. They're living in a religious community and devoted to celibacy and practicing intermittent fasting. There's like too many confounding variables. But it's a shame because there's a wealth of knowledge and experience that has been developed in very different ways for a very long time amongst meditators. And Venerable Dhammadipa, good morning or good evening. It's probably evening in Sri Lanka, but not clear. To sleep peacefully is also one of the benefits mentioned in the Metta Sama Sutta. Yeah, that is one of the benefits of loving kindness. People are having problems with sleep. Increase your devotion to the practice of loving kindness. Good morning, Samrit. Thanks for updating your icon. It's nice to see your face. Dear Ajahn, What are your thoughts on upadana to livelihood and money for laypersons, as these things are essential for a layperson to sustain themselves and even support the Sangha? Well, it's inevitable that we have attachments. So, but progressively, as we develop the path, we can learn to lighten and lessen, and there is a potential to completely overcome those things. So, money's a necessity, but one can overcome it. Food's a necessity, and we have a lot of attachment to food, but even the monks have to eat. So, but the Buddha encourages us to examine that sort of relationship, cultivate the path, and overcome attachment to these things. So, there is a way that we can kind of live and have a more, a less loaded and more utilitarian relationship to the things that we hold to. So, and, money is challenging, maybe not as challenging as our attachment to food, but it is possible to develop a more utilitarian relationship with it, and possible not to be attached to it. So, obviously it's difficult. So we live as monks without money and have rules against owning or controlling or having private funds even. So, and I don't think it's merely because of the difficult nature of being unattached. Some of it has more to do with the livelihood of a monk as a mendicant, but there is certainly a portion of it that speaks to the difficulty in developing non-attachment to such things. So theme I come back to again and again is like seeing the danger in being attached to these things, like seeing how it's creating a liability for suffering in the present and in the future. Good morning, Nadine. A recent article that caught attention suggested make the daring assumption that people are doing the best they can at all times. I have a reflection that's similar to that. If they could have done different, they would have done different. And it helps kind of just supporting, accepting people as they are, instead of creating undue desire for them to be as we would like them to be. It's like a sneaky door for our own greed and hatred. Okay. Okay, the people are here to mow and the sound is kind of ramping up, so I'm gonna make this the last one, but Samrit. Dear Rajan, sometimes when we try to be dispassionate, others assume that we are not interested. Interested. Where'd it go? The wrong one. Okay, let's try this again. Dear Ajahn, sometimes when we try to be dispassionate, others assume that we are not interested in our job. How to address this? Yeah, I've heard this from people. I had a dear friend one time who was in the tech industry, and the more he got interested in his Dhamma practice, the more danger it put him at work, because he had a boss and worked on a team that was so rah about the products they were developing in a way that he found very delusional and at odds with his sense for it, especially in light of Dhamma and Dhamma practice. And eventually he had to just leave. So that might be what has to kind of happen in some jobs. I mean, if the cost is being completely delusional, but there's got to be other ways in most circumstances. One is just be indispensable. You can be dispassionate and be maybe even better at your job and of such a value that that's okay. They'll put up with your dispassion because you produce results and too much value for your boss or for your team or something like that. So that's ultimately what they want. They don't really care about passion. They want results. So give them the results without the passion, if you can. And if that's still not good enough for them, then maybe find a better situation for oneself. So, all right. Well, I'm going to leave it at that for today, and hope everybody is well. And if you have time this afternoon, Lumpur V will be giving a talk on Zoom. Check out tsarna.ca for details if you're not already on their mailing list. And for just a couple days, they've posted the next jhana talk. Number 4 in the series from Ajahn is up and ready to premiere on Sunday. So looking forward to that in 2 days. So be well, everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye for now.